it means that we should work at getting our weights within the recommended level for our height and for our age and so on, okay? So if you are overweight, and we have various ways of determining whether you are overweight or obese. One of them is the body mass index, okay, where we look at your weight over your height squared, okay? And there are norms within which you should fall. So if you go above 25, we say that you are overweight, and above 30, you are obese. But we can also use the waist circumference, okay, to determine whether you are obese or not. And when you are overweight or obese, the best thing to do is to try and bring your weight within the normal limit. Okay. And you can do that by exercising, by watching your diet, and so on, which then brings in the other modifiable risk factors. So for example, we talked about being sedentary or not having enough exercise. Okay, so moderate exercise is good for everyone. Yeah. And there are many forms of exercise you can do. Walking is a very good form of exercise. It doesn't cost anything. You don't need so much equipment, and you can do it anywhere, even within your room. Okay, so if you walk maybe 30 minutes, even 2-3 times a week, that's enough. You can go up and down the stairs. You can decide when I go to town, I'll park my car and do everything by walking. You can dance, you can do aerobics, you can swim. So various things that you can do as a form of exercise, which will ensure that you are working your heart and getting the blood flowing well. And then also we mentioned diet. Yeah. We talked about food that contains a lot of salt. So really sodium, but sodium is salt. And it's very important, especially for us Ghanaians, because a study showed that somehow it seems we have a high threshold for salt. So we eat a lot of salt. Yeah. We need a lot of salt before the food tastes good, which is bad for us.
We eat Kobe.
Exactly. Okay, so we use all salting for all these foods, preservatives as a preservative and all that. So we need to watch our salt intake. Yeah. A diet that is low in salt and then low in fat, okay, saturated fat. Yeah. Now the salt, it's not just what we add, the direct salt we add, but all the spices that we use, okay, especially the cubes and so on, they contain a lot of salt. Okay. And so we have to be careful when we are preparing our food and use very little salt. That's a very big one. If we can do that, it helps. And then, of course, smoking, right? It's a complete no-no. I think we shouldn't even entertain it at all, because apart from hypertension, there are so many other things that come with smoking. So smoking is a no-no. Alcohol, they are conflicting.
Based on the quantity.
Exactly, and the type of alcohol and so on. But I mean, I would advise that if you can avoid it, okay? Because once you start, I mean, it may be difficult for you to stop or to know when to stop. And then you get yourself into all kinds of trouble. So if you can avoid alcohol, if you have to drink, just very little, right? So that you don't put yourself at risk. And then, of course, if you have diabetes, you need to control it. Yeah. Okay, so those are some of the things that I'll tell the youth. I think these days, there's a lot of sedentary lifestyle. Yeah. We sit in our cars, we go to work, we use the lift, and then we sit down the whole day and then back into the car. Okay, so I would advise the youth to get more active and then to watch the foods and the drinks.
Okay, so we are still talking about the silent killer, which means that despite all these things that you've mentioned, unlike maybe a tummy ache or a headache or some rashes, where you actually have an indication that you need to rush to the hospital, you may not have the chance to know that you are even, you know, with a high blood pressure. You just be going about your normal day. So in which case, how or what do you think we should do to help us be able to identify that we are probably, is it hypertensive? Hypertensive, before the killer gets in?
All right, that's a very important question. With hypertension, prevention, with most diseases, right, prevention is better than cure. Okay, so because you don't really have symptoms, occasionally you may have a headache, but there are so many causes of a headache that you're not likely to run to the hospital because you have a headache, unless it's really bad. So the symptoms are usually very non-specific and won't tell you that you have hypertension. And so the only sure way is really to check your blood pressure. And I think that's the main theme for World Hypertension Day this year. Know your numbers. Okay, so I'll talk a little bit about what those numbers are.
Good.
When we say check your blood pressure, what we are saying is have your blood pressure checked. We use two numbers to determine what your blood pressure is. There's an upper number and a lower number, or a higher number and a lower number. The higher one measures your blood pressure or the pressure in the blood vessels when the heart is beating.
Okay.
Okay, and then the lower one measures the pressure in your blood vessels when your heart is resting. So in between beats, right?
Okay.
So you need those two numbers. And the World Health Organization has put out some recommendations, which we all use. And those recommendations are based on the fact that beyond those numbers, the risk for getting the complications of hypertension is increased. So the target is to keep your blood pressure below that. And so we use 140/90 millimeters of mercury. So the upper number is 140, and then the lower number is 90. And that's what we mean by know your numbers.
Yeah.
Ideally, it should be less than 120/80. That's what we would be happy with. Okay, 120/80. Between 120 to 140 or 80 to 90, we need to keep an eye on you because it means you are inching close, okay, to established hypertension.
Okay.
But once it goes beyond 140/90, and it's sustained at that level, you are hypertensive. Okay, so know your numbers means know your upper number, your lower number, and they must be below 140/90.
Very good. How often should we monitor this? So assuming that you don't have any case, you've never been sick or diagnosed, how often? In a year, in a full year?
We would recommend twice a year.
Twice a year?
At least once a year. Because the rise can occur quite suddenly. And if you check just once a year and you are regular at it, then it means if it rises in between, it may take a long time before you recognize it. So twice a year is a good thing, right? So usually I tell people at least on your birthday, have your blood pressure checked. And then maybe halfway in between your birthday and the end of the year, you have your blood pressure checked again.
What about somebody who is already hypertensive? How often should they be checking? Should they, like I go to work and I come back panting and I just want to check? How often? Do they have to do it every day, once a month? How often should they?
It all depends. It all depends on how high the blood pressure was. It depends on what the management is. It depends on how well the patient is taking their medications and doing all the lifestyle modifications. And usually when we start treatment, we want to monitor the treatment and ensure that we have optimal control of the blood pressure. So then you will be giving more frequent reviews at the clinic. But when everything is under control, you may have longer reviews, 3 monthly, 6 monthly. And so in between that, it's good to check your blood pressure at home. You can do it maybe every Sunday evening or every Sunday morning. So you can decide for yourself that I'm going to keep a log of my blood pressure and check every week, once a week, and then you keep a record of it. It helps you to know whether your medications are working well, if you're on medications, or if you really need to go in earlier than your scheduled review.
I was just going to hit on the medication. How is high blood pressure treated? Because I know people who are diagnosed and they prefer not to go on any medication and they want to just exercise. Does that help? We have those that will do 1 day in medication, another day. So this month I'm going to be on medication, the next month I'm going off it. And all this because of the fear of some form of,
side
effects that this medication can give them. So what is the best way of managing this condition?
Right, so there are several goals, right, in managing hypertension. Remember, we said earlier that the reason why we use 140/90 is because research has shown that beyond that, you have complications. The risk for complications is increased. So the goal for management is to keep the blood pressure within normal. That's one. To identify if you have other contributing or other diseases that need to be controlled, like diabetes. Then also to determine at the time of diagnosis whether you already have some complications, because then those will also have to be managed appropriately. Okay, so there are several goals for the management. Typically, at the onset, when the pressures are recognized to be high, you will have a whole battery of tests and examinations to determine other problems, whether there's already damage and so on. And at that point, if you have no damage and it seems to be early, then sometimes we start with lifestyle modification. Because we know that if you are able to control those modifiable factors, you can actually bring your blood pressure within normal if it's low, if it's kind of borderline. And it definitely will reduce the pressure. So even if your pressure is already very high, it will bring it down appreciably. And that will reduce the dose of drug that you may need and even reduce the number of drugs that you may need. I'm sure you're aware that sometimes we use multiple drugs to treat hypertension. And most people with sustained hypertension will need at least 2 drugs. So if you are successful with your lifestyle modifications, you can reduce that to 1.
Okay.
And then even with that 1, you can be on probably the lowest dose. Okay, that will control your blood pressure. But what I'd like to say is we'll start with lifestyle modification, monitor. If it's not working, then we will start the drug therapy.
Okay.
Usually with 1 drug, low dose, and then we scale it depending on how you respond. There are many drugs, many classes and groups of drugs. So often we'll begin with 1 class, see how it works. If it doesn't work well and we need to add another one, we'll pick another one from another class.
Okay.
And then we will see how they work. Okay. It's not, as you said, it's not fun to be taking medications daily forever, right, for a lifetime. And so the manufacturers of the medications, sometimes they try to help by doing combination drugs. So they take drugs from different classes, but they put them into 1 tablet so that you don't have to swallow multiple tablets. Okay, but you have to take your medication. Many people will take it, the blood pressure comes down, then they think they are cured, and then they stop, right? So what we would say is, once you are diagnosed with hypertension, it's for life, and you need to be monitored. Take your medications as prescribed. Go for your regular reviews so that we can be sure that your blood pressure is well controlled and you don't have any complications. And if complications do set in, we can manage them on time.
What is the most unbelievable myth you have heard from a patient as a reason why they would not want to go on medication after you have diagnosed them of being hypertensive?
There are several. And before we even get to the myths, most people don't want to accept that they are hypertensive. They don't. They will give you every reason why the blood pressure at that point is high. They will tell you, oh, I was rushing to the clinic. Or, in fact, somebody annoyed me on the way. Or, I'm under a lot of stress. I didn't sleep well. I mean, they'll give you every reason to explain the high blood pressure. But it's important that if we go through the process and it's established that you have high blood pressure, you accept it. So acceptance is important. And many people feel that it's a spiritual disease, right? So there's no need for we're in a hospital, deliverance and things like that. Okay, so that also affects them complying with the treatment and then having good control. Some people feel that the drugs will give them side effects. It will destroy their bodies and so on, which is not really true. I mean, there are side effects, but we don't give drugs that will kill you. We don't do that. Okay, so we work with the patient. There are many classes and many different types of drugs, and people react differently. So if we give you 1 drug and it's not working well, you have some unbearable effects. Maybe it's causing some unbearable cough, or you have some slight headaches, or you feel uncomfortable. You need to go back and tell the healthcare provider about it so that the drug can be changed. So we work with you to find what works well for you and then what you can take comfortably, and we prescribe that. Okay, so some people also feel, especially the men, right? They feel that it will affect their sexual function.
Has there been any research to prove that?
Well, yes. I mean, some of the drugs can do that, but it's not for everybody. It's not everybody on that drug who will have that problem.
I think all the men watching us left the chats right now with just statements of admitting that there's a possibility.
It can, right? I wouldn't say that some of them can't.
Okay.
Some of them do that. But it's not everybody on that drug who have that side effect. And if you do have that side effect, just tell your health provider about it so that the drugs can be changed.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a legitimate concern, but I want to assure everyone that it's not all the drugs and it's not for everybody. So the fact that your friend is on a drug and has that problem doesn't mean that you will also have that problem.
Okay. What about those who become herbalists right after they've been diagnosed? So they mix all kinds of herbs and concoctions with the belief that these are natural, you know. Usually it comes with all the natural herbs, like probably the ones that we cook with. So you see people doing the ginger with garlic and a whole lot of things that they mix together. Does it work? Or does it give any form of temporary solution? So I'm imagining them taking these herbs. For them to continue, it may mean that after checking, they may see a drastic drop in their high blood pressure, and that is what will probably give them the vim to continue. Yeah.
So there are several things I'll say about that. Yes, some herbs have pharmacologic effect, right? So they have effects that can reduce the blood pressure. But the point is, there are other things in that herb, right? And some of them may not be good for the body.
Okay.
So if you only focus on one aspect of it and you overuse it, you may be exposing your body to the other things that are not so good for you. If the herb has been studied and the active ingredient has been extracted and made into some preparation, like the Mampong people would do, then yes, they have a clinic, I believe. Okay, so you can go there, you can take their prescriptions, you can monitor your blood pressures, but I think they also know when to refer. They know when the limit is, right? And so what I would say is don't sit in your home, take advice from people who are not medical or pseudo-medical, and prepare things that you are really not sure of. Okay, remember that we say plants are natural, but not all natural things are good for us. So the fact that it's natural doesn't mean that it's better than the tablets that you are being given. And what the pharmaceutical companies do is to identify what is producing the desired effect in the plant or whatever, extract it and make it into a tablet. So really, it's the same thing, okay? And so I would encourage people not to be averse to our medications.
Okay. It's getting very interesting here. So we are still talking about the silent killer, that is hypertension. We are going to go on a short break, but remember that we are still live on social media platforms, Trinity United Church, on both YouTube and Facebook. We would love to read out your questions and have the doctor here give answers to them. And so go ahead and send your questions in the comment section. You can also WhatsApp us on 0501 579 996. We'll be right back.
With the growing challenges of life in light of both global and domestic development, the Christian is faced with the difficult task of balancing survival within a secular system and at the same time living a Christian life that pleases their Maker. It is for this reason that we need to have frank conversations on the many issues of life through the Christian lens. So, we bring to you Let's Talk About. On Let's Talk About, we talk about health, career, dating, marriage, family, divorce, politics, finance, and all the issues of life that the Christian is confronted with on a daily basis. Join us this and every Wednesday on the YouTube and Facebook pages of Trinity United Church Legon, and let's talk about life as Christians. With the growing challenges of life in light of both global and domestic development, the Christian is faced with the difficult task of balancing survival within a secular system and at the same time living a Christian life that pleases their Maker. It is for this reason that we need to have frank conversations on the many issues of life through the Christian lens. So, we bring to you Let's Talk About. On Let's Talk About, we talk about health, career, dating, marriage, family, divorce, politics, finance, and all the issues of life that the Christian is confronted with on a daily basis. Join us this and every Wednesday on the YouTube and Facebook pages of Trinity United Church Legon, and let's talk about life as Christians. With the growing challenges of life in light of both global and domestic development, the Christian is faced with the difficult task of balancing survival within a secular system and at the same time living a Christian life that pleases their Maker. It is for this reason that we need to have frank conversations on the many issues of life through the Christian lens. So, we bring to you Let's Talk About. On Let's Talk About, we talk about health, career, dating, marriage, family, divorce, politics, finance, and all the issues of life that the Christian is confronted with on a daily basis. Join us this and every Wednesday on the YouTube and Facebook pages of Trinity United Church Legon, and let's talk about life as Christians. With the growing challenges of life in light of both global and domestic development, the Christian is faced with the difficult task of balancing survival within a secular system and at the same time living a Christian life that pleases their Maker. It is for this reason that we need to have frank conversations on the many issues of life through the Christian lens. So, we bring to you Let's Talk About. On Let's Talk About, we talk about health, career, dating, marriage, family, divorce, politics, finance, and all the issues of life that the Christian is confronted with on a daily basis. Join us this and every Wednesday on the YouTube and Facebook pages of Trinity United Church Legon, and let's talk about life as Christians.
Talking about hypertension, which is a silent killer. Remember that we are still live on all our social media platforms, Trinity United Church, on both YouTube and Facebook. You can go ahead and send in your comments, your questions. We'd love to read them out. We are also on WhatsApp on the number 0501 579 996. Welcome back, Doc. Okay, so we were talking about some of the ways of managing hypertension before we went on the break. Yeah. But I think that we can now talk about, is there only one kind of hypertension or there are many kinds?
That's a good question. So there are basically two types of hypertension.
Okay.
The first type is the most common. We call that primary or essential hypertension.
Okay.
And for this one, really, that's what we've been talking about, right? There's no known cause. It's just a mixture of things or a combination of things, which are the risk factors we mentioned. Okay, so most people who have hypertension will have this kind of hypertension. And that is really good because there's a moderately, like it rises, the pressure rises slowly and gradually throughout life, and it's amenable to treatment. And once it is managed well, you can live a normal, long life. Okay. The second type, which is just about 5 to 10%, which is a good thing, okay, is referred to as secondary hypertension. Okay. And for that one, usually the blood pressure is high because there's some underlying problem. Often it is something with the kidneys. Okay, so if you have kidney disease, different kinds of kidney disease, your blood pressure can go up. Okay. And if the kidney disease is recognized and is well managed, then the blood pressure can actually come down. Then if you have any form of endocrine or glandular disease, like we know about the thyroid gland, adrenal gland, etc., those also, if you have some diseases of those glands, you can have hypertension because of that. Okay. And if they are well managed, again, the blood pressure can come to normal. Then there are certain drugs, and both drugs that we use to treat different kinds of diseases, so legal drugs, right? Yeah. And then the illegal ones like cocaine, okay, they can all also raise the blood pressure and cause hypertension, some of them. Then we have things like pregnancy. Okay, pregnancy for some people can cause an elevation in the blood pressure, but usually once the child is born, it comes down, usually, unless the individual has some predispositions already, like the family history and things like that. So these are secondary types of hypertension, and usually due to some other underlying problem, which if managed properly, the patient can have a cure. Okay, so when you come in and your blood pressure is sustained at that high level, we have to check to see if there are underlying problems causing that. And we rule all that out before we then say you have essential or primary hypertension. And that's a lifelong thing.
Okay.
And then we do all the things we've talked about.
Okay. You know, it just occurred to me that anytime you go to the hospital, one of the very first things that you do is to check our blood pressure.
Yes.
Why exactly is this so?
Because it's a silent killer. That's one.
So once you get to the hospital,
it's an opportunity for us to check, right? So healthcare providers, we always look for opportunities to check for preventable things.
Okay.
So once you enter a health facility, your blood pressure will be checked. Okay, we can pick hypertension up that way. And then, of course, there are other things that can raise your blood pressure. So as part of managing all that, we want to know whether your blood pressure is gone up or not.
Okay, okay. Just because we are getting near to the World Hypertension Day, I think it's on Friday.
It's on Friday.
Perfect. So I just want to ask a question that has to do with government. So the theme this year, we are talking about numbers. And we know a lot of people are walking around this country who are already, you know, with high blood pressure. And for some people, it has to do with their inability to acquire the medications that they have to buy. That actually makes them either shun or pretend they don't want to accept that they have it because they don't want to buy the medication. Does our national health insurance cover this?
It does.
It does?
It does. And
Very
there are
good.
many drugs that are on the national health insurance
Good.
for hypertension.
Good.
So really, I think there's no excuse.
I just wanted this to be clear.
Yes.
So somebody watching us today is not saying that I'm not going to the hospital or I'm not, you know, visiting to recheck because I can't buy my medication and all that.
Yes.
So, and I'm sure that there are various kinds of medications
There
depending
are.
on...
There's what we call the generic. So the generic is the actual compound that will give you the desired effect.
Okay.
And those are usually not expensive.
Okay.
It's usually the brand names,
Okay.
that cost quite a bit.
Okay.
And remember, we talked about pharmaceutical companies doing combination drugs.
Yes.
So that instead of buying two separate drugs, you can have just one.
Okay.
And that also brings the cost down. So, I mean, I think there's opportunity for everybody to get the treatments that they need.
Okay. I would love for us to demonstrate, but before that, let me get the first question here coming from Derek. Derek wants to know if lack of sleep increases your blood pressure.
It does.
It does.
Especially when it's consistent. So remember, hypertension is a sustained increase in your blood pressure. We are very busy people, young people these days, working, looking for money and all that. So sometimes you may skip a good night's rest, okay, and your blood pressure can go up and that sort of thing. But if you do it consistently, then you are putting yourself at risk. Yes.
Okay. All right. So back to this numbers. Let's focus on numbers for now. So when you were speaking earlier on, you mentioned that there are two numbers, 140 and 90, which would be considered a high blood pressure. And then you mentioned 120 and 80, which is something that we would consider as normal.
Yes.
Okay. We have people who buy the machine to check their own blood pressure at home. We have those who sometimes go to the pharmacy or they go to the hospitals. Assuming that you are about to take or check your blood pressure, how should you prepare towards this? Because I know everything at all can affect the numbers, and it's important that you get the correct number.
Yes, there are many things that can affect your blood pressure. So before you check your blood pressure, you need to be relaxed, right? So if you have been busy doing house chores, that's not a good time right after to sit down to check your blood pressure. Or if you just come in from a walk or something, or if you had an argument with somebody.
You're having some palpitations, I want to be sure I'm not going to fall and die anytime soon. So
it's not a good time. It's not a good time to take your blood pressure right after a warm bath, things like that. Okay, so you need to be relaxed, sit for a while, feel calm. Your feet should be planted flat, okay, like mine are now. You need an equipment that you know works. Okay, so it's important to check that your equipment is well calibrated.
Okay.
And you can take it from time to time into the hospital to ensure that it's working well.
Okay.
So your equipment will be used to check your blood pressure. The hospital equipment will be used, and we can tell you whether yours is working well or not. So your feet should be flat. Your equipment should be working well.
Okay.
And it should be at the level of your heart, really. Okay, so the table and your arm, when you rest it, should be at the level of your heart.
Okay.
And you should be relaxed. And lastly, you should not be talking and chatting while you check your blood pressure. So I'll just demonstrate
Great.
how you can do this if you are alone at home.
Okay.
I mean, if you have another person at home, they can check it for you. But if you're alone, you need to, this is the cuff.
Okay.
And then this is the equipment that will actually check the pressure.
Does the cuff come in different sizes?
There are different sizes.
Okay.
And the different sizes are meant to fit your arm size. So if you have a big arm, you need a big cuff, right? And if you have a small arm, you need a small cuff.
All right.
So you turn on your equipment, make sure it's zeroed nicely. And then you'll find that the tube going into the equipment is sitting on one end of the cuff.
Okay.
So you place that over your elbow. If you look carefully, you'll be able to see that there's a blood vessel running.
Yeah, where they
in
usually
your elbow. Take the blood sample. So you place your cuff over your elbow with the tube facing that vessel.
Okay.
And then you ensure that it's sitting comfortably. And then you start your equipment.
So you're waiting. Are you relaxed? Exactly.
So tell you the value.
Okay.
It's also, this kind of equipment can give you your pulse.
Okay.
And then most of them can keep a record of your blood pressure checks. Okay, so you can actually go into the memory and see what your blood pressure has been over a period of time.
Okay.
But just to be sure that you don't lose that data, you can still have a little notebook.
Okay.
And you write the dates and then the time and then what the value is. And it's useful to take that book with you when you are going for your reviews so that your doctors can see how well your blood pressure is controlled at home.
Very good. What would be the effect of a bad reading on the patient?
So you mean, for example,
there's a problem with this and you're not
equipment.
aware, and you keep, writing down wrong numbers, how would that affect you as a patient?
So it depends on what the wrong values are.
Okay.
If they are wrongly low, then you get a false sense of being fine.
Okay.
Right? Because every time you check, it's low. So you think your blood pressure is well controlled, when in actual fact, the equipment may be faulty. Okay, so even though you have this at home, it's useful to go for your reviews, and also useful in between reviews to walk into a clinic or a pharmacy and have your blood pressure checked. But you have to be sure about who is checking it.
Yeah.
Be sure that they know what they're doing and that they're doing the right thing so that you can rely on the value that you get.
Okay. Okay. So we have another question coming in. Does amlodipine reduce sexual performance? That's another concerned man.
That's a concerned man. I really will not be able to say. I think I made a disclaimer at the beginning.
Yes.
I'm a pathologist.
Yes.
So I don't actively prescribe these drugs and monitor them. I'm not sure what the experience with amlodipine is. The best person to answer that question will be the healthcare provider who put the patient on that drug.
And like you mentioned earlier on, some people may have that effect, others may not. So when you're having it,
you have to be reported.
Yes, reported.
Yes.
Okay. So we have another question by Eli Plim. Doc, please, can you comment on the use of natural remedies such as raw garlic, Percocet, etc., in lieu of pills for someone who's been diagnosed with high blood pressure?
I will not recommend that you do just that. I would recommend that you must be under the care of somebody who knows what they're doing. Okay. So self-management is definitely out of the question. Even for medical professionals, you shouldn't treat yourself. You have to go under the care of someone who can objectively do the right thing for you. Yeah. Okay, so you may use those as adjuncts, but I would recommend that you go for somebody who knows what they're doing to manage the hypertension for you.
Okay. All right. Another question here from Ruth Riedu. Doctor, regarding the checking of blood pressure at the health facilities, is it supposed to be free or for a fee?
Well, if you go in for consultation, then as part of the consultation fee, you get your blood pressure checked. Okay, so usually you would be paying for your consultation. But if you just want a check and you go in and ask the nurses, oh, please, can you check my blood pressure for me? Usually they wouldn't charge you. They wouldn't charge you for that. I think probably some of the pharmacies, and I understand some people may have the equipment sitting by the roadside, and then for those, they may charge you a small fee. But really, going into a clinic and asking kindly, can you check my blood pressure, shouldn't cost you anything. If you are going for consultation, then yes, you would pay consultation fee.
Yeah, when you mentioned that some people have the equipment, I want to imagine if there's nobody working in the local market with a machine and moving from one person to another. And is that advisable? Is there any way that the readings from the machine will be affected by, I imagine, the blazing sun and walking around, and will they affect it in any way?
I don't really think so, but the important thing is the individual checking the pressure must know what they're doing, right?
Not somebody with just a machine.
Exactly. You see people going around with a bag of pills and dispensing, yes. So that sort of thing you wouldn't want to do.
Okay.
Whoever is checking you should know that this person is competent enough.
Okay.
And I know that as part of outreach programs, some health facilities would send professionals into the marketplaces, you know, where you can find people doing their daily activities, and then you give them that opportunity to have their pressures checked. But I'm sure that those outreaches are usually well publicized and the people will be properly identified and so on.
Okay. So. All right. Another question here is the ideal readings for older people 140, 90?
All right. So we said blood pressure, it's not a static value, right? It's not like every time we check your blood pressure, it should be 120/80. It's not static. Naturally, it fluctuates throughout the day, but it fluctuates within around a normal range. And so that's why we said anything below 120/80 to, let's say, 90/60 shouldn't go below that also, okay? That's also hypotension, which is another problem. But below 120/80 to about 90/60 will be considered normal. But as we age, remember, we said that we have changes in our bodies that cause our blood pressures to rise, okay? So you may not use the same levels that you'd use for a 20-year-old, for a 60-year-old. So if for a 20-year-old, the pressure is 90/60, we are okay. And there are charts to ensure that they are within range. But if for a 60-year-old, it's 130/85, I wouldn't be running around, okay? But definitely, beyond 140/90, we need to take a look at it.
Don't we have people who are with a high blood pressure, and I'm not using the word high blood pressure in lieu of hypertension, but are not hypertensive? Like they are naturally with high blood pressure, they would never be found at 120, and that's like forever. But then they are not hypertensive. Is it possible?
No.
Not possible?
No. And I will say, well, I will say not possible in the sense that because research has shown that from 140/90 and above, you are at risk of getting the complications. We won't want to assume that it's normal, right? We would want to take steps to bring it down. Okay, so we use those guidelines from WHO. And so I wouldn't say that it's normal for somebody's blood pressure to be high. And between 120 to 140, we wouldn't say you are established hypertensive, but we would say that you are inching towards established hypertension. And even there's room for management so that we can keep the blood pressure within the normal range.
So what is the worst case scenario of somebody who has been diagnosed of having high blood pressure? What happens to you at your worst stage?
There are many complications that can happen, and Unfortunately, these are usually catastrophic events. Okay, so you've heard about stroke, right? Hypertension is one of the biggest causes of stroke. And when we say stroke, what we mean is that you have some injury to your brain,
Okay.
which may be because of blood coming out of the vessels into the brain.
Okay.
Okay, so the vessels rupture because, or they break up because the pressure is too high.
Okay.
Or sometimes they are blocked and the flow of blood is not adequate.
Okay.
So you get an injury to the brain. And hypertension is one of the biggest causes. And often that is how the patient will know that they have hypertension. So they are fine, seemingly, then suddenly they have a stroke. Okay, and then we find that they have hypertension. Another thing that can occur is you can have a heart attack. Okay, so that is also another catastrophic event.
Okay.
Complain of sudden severe chest pain, and then before you get to hospital, you may actually die from that. Or you can have heart failure, okay, or you can have kidney disease. And we all know there's been a lot of talk about dialysis this week and so on. So you can have such bad kidney disease that you may need dialysis. Okay, and then it can affect your eyes because you know the blood vessels supply blood to every part of the body. So your eyes, the small vessels in your limbs, legs, hands, and particularly for the legs, can be so bad that you may need amputation.
Wow.
Okay, so the complications are not desirable. And it's best to prevent hypertension. If for some reason you become hypertensive, then you need to work at maintaining your blood pressure within normal so that you can prevent these complications from taking
Is there any
place.
known research going on that will actually come up with some medicine that you just take and then, you know, or till now it still remains something that is going to stay with you forever?
Till now.
Till now.
But there's a lot of research going on.
Okay.
And who knows, maybe one day we'll find some gene therapy that can change the abnormal genes that predispose to hypertension, and that would fix the problem. So research is still actively going on, looking for better ways to treat hypertension.
What is the youngest age that somebody can be actually diagnosed with high blood pressure?
Right. So really, you're asking if children can have hypertension.
Yes, exactly.
And yes, children can and do have hypertension.
Wow.
Okay. Often it's the secondary type.
Okay.
So there's some underlying problem, either some other blood vessel disease or usually kidney disease that then causes the blood pressure to go up in children. But with the increasing childhood obesity, remember we talked about obesity and hypertension. I'm not sure of any studies done here linking childhood obesity with childhood hypertension. I don't know about any study like that or with to give figures. But certainly in the US, there are over 3 million children who have hypertension. And it's been linked to the increasing childhood obesity. Okay, so yes, children can have hypertension. And the same modifiable risk factors are important. And the same lifestyle modifications will be important also for children. So it's something we need to work at, right? Ensuring that our children are not obese and they are eating right from the beginning.
If it's, assuming it's genetic, is it likely to show up at such a tender age?
It depends on what it is. And yes, it can. So some genetic causes of hypertension may present early in life, yes.
Okay. So we have a listener, and I'm sure many listeners who probably have been diagnosed with high blood pressure. So I want you to speak to them. Encourage them. Most of them are probably watching and are not taking their medication.
Religiously.
Religiously, yes. They are just doing one day in, one day out, and they've heard what you've said, and I'm sure they are probably scared. They are probably scared, but they will not do the right thing still. So I want you to speak to them and encourage them, being your final words, why they should take it. Why it's important that they should be religious about taking it.
All right. So first, I'll speak to those who are not hypertensive. So to everyone, really. The theme for this year's World Hypertension Day is Know Your Numbers. And we want you to know your numbers so that we can detect it quickly when you develop hypertension, if you develop hypertension. So please know your numbers. Get your blood pressures checked. Get your blood pressures checked.
You go on.
Twice a year, on your birthday at least. If you forget, don't forget to check your blood pressure on your birthday. Keep your eyes on those numbers and ensure that you are controlling all the modifiable factors that we talked about. Watch your weight, stop smoking, stop drinking or drink only in moderation, and watch the salt intake and so on. Eat lots of fruits, vegetables, and diets that are low in fat.
Okay.
And then to those who are hypertensive, who have been diagnosed as having essential hypertension and have been put on lifelong medication, I want you to know that, yes, the medication is lifelong, but if you take it and you are compliant and you are working with your healthcare provider, you can have a long, normal life. The complications will be kept at bay, and you may die from something else completely at a ripe old age. Okay, so there's no fear. If you have any side effects, just go back and talk to your healthcare provider and they'll work with you to get what works best for you. And one last piece of advice. When you take the medications, the blood pressure will come down, but that doesn't mean that you are cured. So don't go off the medications when you see that the pressure is normal, because the minute you stop, it will go back up. So it is lifelong treatment until your doctor clears you, and just work with your healthcare provider and it will be well. And of course, as Christians, we trust God to keep us healthy. We work with God, who has given the healthcare providers the opportunity to be his healing hands. Okay, and we pray to God to keep us healthy while we do the things that we need to do.
I don't think I want to skip Abna Baini's question. Can you mention some other signs that shows one has a pressure problem? Is there any sign?
There are some signs, right? Sometimes you feel uncomfortable.
Okay.
Okay, so you just feel unwell, right? You're not sure what it is, but you feel unwell. Sometimes you have some funny sensations in your throat.
Oh.
Some people have a dullness in their head or a throbbing sensation.
Okay.
Some people have headaches, right, which are very bad and persistent. Okay, so anything that makes you uncomfortable should drive you to the hospital.
Okay.
And a hospital check will be accompanied by a blood pressure check. So then we can determine whether you have hypertension or not.
Okay. And then we have Nana Oyenete, who says, why do drugs have side effects? It manages one disease and gives you another. Is it possible to have drugs without side effects? I'm asking this question because some people are afraid to take the hypertension drugs because of the side effect.
Yes, so there are some drugs which have very little or no side effects.
Okay.
And there are some that have side effects. Usually the pharmaceutical companies will test the drugs over a long period of time and in different populations and age groups. And the testing is to determine what side effects are common, what are not so common, what are rare, and they will report that. And remember that healthcare providers don't mean to harm you. Okay, so we will use drugs for their benefits. We always weigh the benefits of using the drug against the disadvantage.
Yeah.
And so if a side effect, you experience a side effect which is uncomfortable for you, just speak to your healthcare provider. There are other options and they'll work with you to choose what is best for you. So you don't have to suffer taking the drug and experiencing the side effect, and you shouldn't also just stop taking it and sit at home.
Okay.
Just go back and report the side effect and we'll work with you to get what works best for you.
Okay. So there's another question. Please, do you think someone who has high blood pressure can engage in high intensive exercise?
Yes, so research has shown that some exercise is good for the heart, right? So exercise like using the treadmill and so on is quite intensive. Okay, but before you begin any exercise regime, you need to speak to your doctor, and you need to also speak to a fitness instructor, right, who understands health and fitness.
Good.
Okay, so that they work with you to determine what form of exercise is best for you. Okay, and everyone is different. Everybody's tolerance level is different.
Yeah.
So it's not advisable to start an exercise regime just on your own, a high intensive exercise regime just on your own. You need to speak to your healthcare provider and then they'll work with you with a fitness instructor or a physiotherapist to determine what would be good for you.
Okay. Viewers, it has been another interesting time here on Let's Talk About. We would like to say a big thank you to our guest, Dr. Efo-Owusu-Adakwa Abrahams, who is a consultant pathologist at Kolebu Teaching Hospital and also a senior lecturer at the University of Ghana Medical School. And also, again, she is a member of Trinity United Church. Join us same time next week for another interesting topic. My name is Edinam Ejesika and I've been your host this evening. Have a good evening.